I never thought I'd wake up one morning to find strangers stealing something you can't even see water. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from, because what happened next could only happen in my neighborhood. It started like any other warm Saturday morning. The sun had just crawled over the line of pine trees behind my property, sprinkling gold light over my backyard. I could hear the faint chirping of birds and the soft hum of my well pump, the same deep metallic whir I'd grown used to over the years. That sound meant security, independence. I wasn't hooked up to city water. I had my own private well, dug 20 years ago when I first bought this land. My property stretched across 3 acres with my home sitting proudly at the center. It was quiet, peaceful, until I noticed something odd near the pump house. A pair of tire tracks cut through the dewy grass, fresh and heavy. The mud was still wet, glistening under the morning light. My stomach tightened. I hadn't driven out there recently, so who did? I followed the tracks, my boots squelching in the soft dirt, until I reached the old wooden shed that housed my well system. That's when I saw it. The padlock I'd placed on the latch was broken, hanging loosely like a snapped chain of trust. My breath caught as I pulled the door open, and I froze. There was a new shiny metal pipe running from my main line, one that hadn't been there yesterday. It branched off, running underground toward the direction of the HOA community center. I stood there in stunned silence for several seconds, my mind racing to process what I was looking at. Someone the HOA had tapped into my private well. For years, the HOA had been trying to convince me to connect to their shared system. They said it was for safety and uniformity. I'd refused every single time. My well was cleaner and, more importantly, mine. But this was theft, pure and simple. The sound of the pump now felt sinister, like it was struggling under the weight of unwanted guests. I crouched, tracing my fingers along the pipe. It was warm. The water was already flowing. They'd been using it for hours. Rage burned in my chest, sharp and cold. I stood up, scanning the area for cameras or anyone nearby. That's when I spotted 2 men in orange vests walking away from the property line, laughing and carrying clipboards. My voice cracked with anger. "Hey, what do you think you're doing on my property?" They froze, then exchanged glances. One of them, a heavy-set man with a beard, turned slowly. "Just HOA maintenance, sir," he said too casually. "We were told this connection was approved." "Approved by who?" I demanded, stepping closer. He shrugged. "MS. Peterson, HOA president." That name sent a chill through me. Linda Peterson, the self-proclaimed queen of our subdivision. She ran the HOA like a personal empire. She once fined me for having a mailbox too rustic, and forced my neighbor to repaint his entire fence because the shade of white was off-brand. And now she'd taken my water. I clenched my fists. "Get your tools and cut that pipe off right now," I said, my voice low but shaking. The men hesitated, then one muttered, "You'll have to talk to Linda." They left quickly, their truck kicking up dust as it drove off. I stood there, staring at the pipe running into the ground, the faint gurgle of my stolen water echoing beneath my feet. My peaceful Saturday had turned into a declaration of war. I stormed back toward my house, every step pounding with disbelief and anger. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and dialed Linda's number from the HOA directory. It rang twice before her overly sweet, practiced voice answered. "Hello, this is Linda Peterson, president of—" "Cut the act, Linda," I snapped. "You and your workers broke into my well and tapped it. I want it disconnected now." There was a pause, then the sound of a faint chuckle. "Oh, that," she said smoothly. "It's not a big deal, dear. We're experiencing a temporary shortage in the community wells, so we decided to borrow a little from yours. It's for the neighborhood's good." "Borrow," I repeated, my voice rising. "You trespassed, vandalized my property, and stole my water. That's not borrowing, that's a crime." Her tone hardened. "Mr. Davis, the HOA has certain emergency rights. You live under our jurisdiction." I laughed bitterly. "My land predates this HOA by 20 years. You don't own a drop of it." She sighed like a teacher scolding a child. "If you refuse to cooperate, we can issue fines for noncompliance. I suggest you calm down." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, feeling my pulse race. She'd hung up on me. That smug woman actually believed she could take whatever she wanted. I stormed outside again, determined to document everything. I took pictures of the broken lock, the pipe, the tire tracks, every detail. The air smelled of wet soil and diesel fuel. My dog barked from the porch, picking up on my tension. I looked toward the HOA clubhouse in the distance, that polished building they used for meetings and parties. My stolen water was probably flowing into its bathrooms right now. By noon, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered along the edge of my property. They'd noticed the commotion, the repair truck, my yelling earlier. Mrs. Collins, an older woman from across the street, approached me hesitantly. "Is everything all right, Jack?" she asked. "No," I said through clenched teeth. "They tapped my well." Her eyes widened. "They can't do that, can they?" Apparently, Linda thinks she can do whatever she wants. By evening, word had spread. Some neighbors sided with me, others stayed silent, scared of crossing the HOA. I spent that night pacing my living room, replaying Linda's smug voice over and over. My lamp cast long shadows on the walls, flickering like angry ghosts. That's when an idea began forming, simple, legal, and poetic. If they wanted to borrow my water, I'd make sure they knew exactly who controlled it. I opened my laptop, pulling up diagrams of my well system. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I searched for one specific piece of hardware. A control valve, industrial grade, pressure, sealed, key-locked. I could install it right at the branch where their illegal pipe connected. The next morning, I drove to the local hardware supplier and picked one up. The man behind the counter looked curious when I explained I needed it to regulate unauthorized flow. He didn't ask questions. By midday, I was back at the well shed, tools laid out, sun beating down on my neck. The air was heavy, humid. Every clang of the wrench echoed like a war drum. I worked fast, cutting their line clean and fitting the valve in place. When I turned the handle, the water flow toward the HOA stopped instantly. I smiled, sweat dripping down my temples. They wanted my well. They could have it on my terms. 2 days later, chaos erupted. I was sipping my morning coffee when I heard shouting echoing across the neighborhood. I stepped onto my porch and saw Linda herself marching up the street, flanked by 2 HOA board members and a maintenance guy dragging a wrench. Her heels clicked angrily against the pavement, her face red with fury. "Mr. Davis," she barked as she reached my gate, "you've cut off water to the entire community center. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I set down my mug and leaned casually against the railing. "Actually, I do. I stopped you from stealing from me." She glared, eyes narrowing into icy slits. "That pipe was connected for community use. You've violated HOA regulations." "You mean I stopped your illegal tap into private property?" I shot back. "I've got photos, timestamps, and a broken lock to prove it." A few neighbors had gathered again, watching from across the street. Phones were already out, recording. I could see the panic flicker behind Linda's mask of control. She turned to the crowd. "He's being unreasonable. We were just helping everyone have clean water." I crossed my arms. "You mean helping yourself? Funny how your clubhouse had full pressure while the rest of us had low flow." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The maintenance man shifted awkwardly, refusing to meet her eyes. Then, like fate wanted to make the moment perfect, a white county vehicle rolled into view. A man in a blue uniform stepped out, a water authority inspector. I'd filed a report the previous morning, attaching every photo and video. He held a clipboard and asked, "Which one of you is Mr. Davis?" I raised my hand. "And your MS, Peterson?" he asked, turning to Linda. She straightened, forcing a polite smile. "Yes, I represent the HOA." The inspector adjusted his glasses and flipped through his notes. "Well, ma'am, we traced an unauthorized connection from your facility to this property's private well. That's a serious code violation, trespassing, tampering, and unlicensed plumbing work." Her smile faltered. "There must be a misunderstanding." "I don't think so," he interrupted. "You're facing potential fines of up to $10,000 and will need to shut your facility down pending investigation." The crowd gasped. Someone even clapped quietly. Linda's face turned pale, then crimson. "You'll regret this, Mr. Davis," she hissed, but her voice trembled now. I simply nodded. "Maybe next time you'll ask before you take." As she turned away, the inspector handed her a citation. The HOA board members whispered among themselves, stepping away from her like she carried a disease. Justice, served cold and clear as the water they tried to steal. That evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, I sat by the well house again. The pump hummed softly, steady and free. I turned the valve slightly, letting water flow once more, but this time only to my home. The sound of running water never felt so satisfying, so powerful, so deserved.